Good morning. Good morning. Now, we had high aspirations this morning of showing you something extraordinary live. Ospreys, for the first time, building a nest in the south of England, down at Poole Harbour, not, I don't know, 40 miles from where we're sitting this morning. Not something I could have ever envisaged when I was a kid. You know, in the 70s, Ospreys were still restricted to Scotland. There were egg collectors trying to pinch their eggs all the time. They were extraordinarily rare birds, always on the news. But Osprey conservation has been doing great things. Sadly, the bird flew off just before we started, but we can show you this. This was just a few minutes ago down in Poole Harbour. And this is one of the female ospreys that has returned to this nesting platform. Beautiful view behind the bird there, absolutely stunning. And later on in our little broadcast this morning, we're going to be talking to Tim Mackrell. Tim is one of the team that have been responsible for putting these ospreys back, and he's going to be giving us a bit of history about the birds in the UK and all about this project too. What a view, what a way to start.
Isn't it amazing?
Sensational.
Live ospreys, who'd have thought about that? Oh, amazing. Anyway, so on to Sound Approach UK. Of course, we've been doing these every day, giving you an insight into the bird songs. So we've been asking you to go onto Twitter to follow Sound Approach UK. So this is today's song. Have a listen to this. It's very, very distinctive. It's got that twittering, isn't it? Oh, what was that? Oh, this is going. It gets that twittering and that sudden wheezy sound. It's something that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's very common and widespread throughout the UK. Of course, it is the Eurasian greenfinch. We see it quite a lot on our feeders, don't we?
We do. We see them on the feeders, and that sort of that sound that they make in it, where they normally sing from the very tops of trees and bushes. They love getting up on top of leylandii trees. It's sort of battling with this wren here, and there's a robin as well. And they're right behind us. They're absolutely berserk this morning. But if you could hear the greenfinch, yeah, they've got that very characteristic, a bit monotonous as a song.
A little bit monotonous, but you will see them. They like dense hedgerows, the edge of woodlands and edge of fields as well, where those hedgerows are really strong. So that's where you'll mostly find them.
Gardens, yeah.
Gardens, yeah. If you've got dense bushes, it's a good place for them to be nesting.
High song posts. They're always seen right on the top of a tree. There's a tree there, and they're up there.
Get their song out.
Making that. Yeah, exactly. Projecting that song. Now, the other thing that we've been doing is Skull of the Day. This is going to be the last Skull of the Day for a little while. We've got a great new competition coming up next week. Have a look at this, though. This is quite an extraordinary skull. Look at that. So there's this very steep forehead here, and then the bill, which is narrow and pointed, is slightly upturned. Look at the back of the skull. Very unusual. So this is the skull of a pretty unusual bird, and in terms of the rarity in my skull collection, I'd say this is probably the rarest bird skull that I've got. Look at that.
Very unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, sensational. Sensational stuff. What about that? So if you think you know what that is, then let us know. Twitter, Facebook, all of the platforms as per. Now, we've been showing you pictures, Sparrowhawk of the day. Male Sparrowhawk is my favourite bird. And a few years ago, I was very fortunate to meet Alan Fadden at one of his photographic hides up in Dumfriesshire, and I saw Mad Max. And yesterday, I showed you this photograph of Mad Max. It's the nickname he had for this particular bird. Here it is, preening its tail. It's an exquisite photograph, absolutely exquisite. And at that time, whilst I was sat in the hide talking to Alan, waiting for the bird to arrive, I was fantasising about the ultimate Sparrowhawk photograph. And I said to Alan, what it would be for me would be a male sparrowhawk, full adult plumage, eating a male bullfinch, full adult plumage, in the snow. I love bullfinches. In fact, when I looked out the bedroom window this morning, there was one sat about 2 metres above Meg's head here. Super beautiful, pink breast, stunning bird. But of course, they are prey to sparrowhawks on occasion. Alan has done it.
He's only gone and done it.
He's pulled it off. Look at that. It's taken a few years. It's taken a few years. So that is one of the most remarkable photos. It's exquisitely beautiful. You might feel sorry for the bullfinch. I do too. I love bullfinches. But what a combination. The male sparrowhawk, the male bullfinch in the snow, the simplicity of the background. Oh, my goodness
You
me.
were crying, weren't you?
Well, he sent them through the other day, and I just honestly was pacing around the table.
Sweating.
Yeah.
There was a lot of
I was having a bit of
uncomfortable.
Well, it was a mixture of awe and envy. Awe and envy. And if you want to look at more of Alan's photographs, he doesn't just photograph sparrowhawks, he does pine martins, he does tawny owls, he does water rails, all sorts of different species. Then he's on Instagram, Alan McFadden, Fadyen, Alan McFadden. It's going to take me a little while to get over.
But while you're getting over that, shall I introduce our guests?
Yes.
Right. Well, today we have the fantastic Gary Moore coming back again. He's been up bright and early this morning, awake with the birds as, of course, they're singing their dawn chorus. He was up super early to capture the very, very best of it, and this is what he found.
Okay, well, I'm down here on my allotment this morning. It's about a 15-minute walk from my first floor flat. For me, this is a real escape. It means that I can get some exercise and potentially grow a bit of food. And also it's another location just to do a little bit of dawn chorus. Again, we're already a little bit late. It's just gone 6. Dawn chorus really starts about half an hour before and half an hour after dawn, basically. So we're already a little bit late. Just have a quick listen to what we've got around here at the moment. We've got classic blackbird. The wind's picked up this morning, so it's not great. It's going through the tops of these trees. I've dropped down to a little sheltered area just to avoid the wind. Blackbird, wren, song thrush. A little look this side. Yeah, that's a nice wren, and even in the distance I'm picking up the herring gulls on the river itself in the centre of town. I'm only about 5 minutes walk from the centre of town. The buildings to my left here are Marlborough buildings, built in 1788. I'm literally just behind the Royal Crescent, so as far as allotments go, you couldn't pick a better location. The birds started singing extra early this morning. That's because we had this full moon, so the robins and the blackbirds were going well before light this morning. There we go, it's just that classic herring gull. And again, that fantastic wren. Again, I'm not far from quite a busy road. As I say, busy road, the road that goes to the hospital. So understandably, that's still quite busy this morning, even though we are in lockdown. I'm going to be honest with you. There's my local home base gave away all their plants this week. They wheeled them out into the car park and said to anybody, take what you want, make a little donation. And so I must admit, I did stock up my allotment with seedlings from home base. If you was to add all the allotments and all the gardens together, they say it makes an area the size of Somerset. So that's really just how important gardens and allotments are. And again, with lockdown at the moment, we know garden centres are suffering. So, and not only that, but we're growing a bit of veg, and that's good, isn't it? Take a bit of pressure off supermarkets. Again, herring gulls, distant wood pigeon there. Again, classic thing people say, my toe is bleeding for the wood pigeon. But I like to say, I know I'm boring. Okay, that wren does seem to be the dominant song this morning. Blackbird's quite nice. Wood pigeon again over there. Again, I'm using my trusty parabolic reflector. As far as birdsong goes, it's there's not much can beat them really. Somebody did ask me a question: are there domestic affordable versions of these? And I've got to say, I've shopped around for a long time, and unfortunately, I don't think there are. Some people attempt to make them out of various plastic dishes by fitting their own microphone inside. But I'm going to be honest with you, there are not that many different varieties on the market. I'd like to go roam about really and get closer to some of these birds, but the problem is I've just developed this little plastic box which allows me to put 2 feeds of audio into my iPhone. So I'm wearing actually a little radio mic there. I've got my parabolic, and it also gives me a headphone feedback. So that's 2 sources of audio into my iPhone and 1 back, but which means that I'm tied basically to my phone. I can't wander as far as I'd like to go. Now, when I do record my dawn chorus, again, I tend to do it in mono. I will record some stereo wild tracks, but basically I want to get those individual songsters as clean and as pure as I can. So for me, a stereo image can often muddy the waters a little bit. I will do a stereo image to go along with it, but if I really want those clean, classic dawn chorus songsters, I'll record in mono on my parabolic reflector. Again, a group of pigeons has gone over. So already you see, we're now, what are we looking at now? We're now 20 past 6 actually, and it's already very quiet. Just goes to show you've got to get up extra early, and between now and the end of May, I think, are really the peak periods. The 2 classic weeks are that first week of May and that last week of April. For me are the 2 classic dawn chorus weeks. Right, a little competition. I know Chris does skull of the day, but I've got a particular skull here. It was a skull that me and Chris collected together. We collected it on the north coast of Scotland, between Elgin and Inverness. Now, Chris had very distinctive feathers off this duck, and I managed to capture the skull. So there we go. Look at that, very distinctive beak with some very distinctive feathers. So there we go.
Hi guys, I don't know if you can remember, Chris, the day we found that skull, some of the birds had been acting quite bizarre, and we found a dead one on the beach, so maybe that's a giveaway. Again, a little bit closer look, there's the skull with quite a distinct beak there. I also submitted the call, which was also recorded on the same day. I don't know if you can hear that. Great. First light, but of course it was difficult for me to make the film in the dark, so that's why it looks like it was probably a bit too late for dawn chorus this morning. But I was out before light. It was cold and it was very windy. But what difference a couple of hours makes? It's like a totally different day at the moment.
Hello, Gav.
Yeah, sorry.
Right.
We're
still here.
Yeah,
okay.
We're still here.
Still here.
I thought we were going to chat about the skull, basically.
Yes,
absolutely.
I recall that morning, when we were filming, and we had a little bit of a, it was, I'll have the tail, you have the skull type thing. Last night, you're going to be ashamed of me, because I was rifling through my collections, trying to find those long-tailed duck feathers. And I had seen them recently. Rest assured, I've not lost them, but I couldn't find them last night. I found loads of packets of feathers, all sorts of extraordinary things from all over the world, but I couldn't lay my hands on those long-tailed duck feathers to wave them or brandish them this morning. So, but don't worry, Gary, I definitely haven't lost them. They're there somewhere. But that collection needs cataloguing, my feather collection, that's for sure. But great to be out first thing this morning. If people are going to be taking their exercise, then getting up early to get that bird song at this time of year is well worth it, isn't it?
It is, and it's only going to get earlier and earlier. I say, for me personally, I think the best 2 weeks is that last week of April, the first week of May. They are the peak times, and as you know, we get an extra 2 minutes of 2 minutes of extra daylight a day. Now that's a minute in the morning and a minute at night. It doesn't sound like much, but you've got to remember, over the weeks now, these next 3 or 4 weeks, that makes a dramatic difference. So I was awake at 4 this morning. I was out at 5. Again, it was really cold and dark. But I think you never regret getting up early, getting your boots on, just to make the effort to get there. You're always rewarded with something. And sure enough, I sat on the allotment. I know everybody sees it, but a little fox came trotting by whilst I just sat on the allotment, totally oblivious to what I was there. So it was really good. So I've had my hours exercise. I've looked at my allotment. Now I'm back indoors for a little bit more bird song in other people's gardens, unfortunately.
Isn't that really special? I mean, it just goes straight. Getting up early is so worth it, isn't it? I mean, I have my bedroom window open and I'm like woken up by the dawn chorus, and I just love that. But getting out and experiencing it, there is nothing else like it.
And Gary, we've got a song thrush here at the moment, and it's singing pretty much all the daylight hours. You know, it's just not stopping at all.
Okay. The thing I like about the song thrush is that the classic thing that always gives it away is it always repeats itself at the end, doesn't it? That 3 classic notes at the end. When people always ask me about song thrush, that's what I always tend to look out for. It's just those classic, it repeats itself 3 times at the end of its song. Is it calling close? Is it good?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's just amazing. But what's most admirable is the relentless nature of it. It just barely takes a break. I can't imagine when it's finding time to, catch a snail and smash it over a stone. It's just absolutely full on.
I can tell a lot from the quality of that song, and the fact that it can do it all day is sending a good message to the females that it's probably got a good habitat and that it's quite a fit bird. So fairly.
Yeah,
excellent.
Very true.
All right, Gary, thanks ever so much for joining us again. Come back to you a bit later. As you say, birdsong's yet to reach its peak, really. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll come back and hopefully you can give us a bit more joy from that birdsong, available to everyone if they stick their ear out of the window or get up early.
It's like yoga for your ears, Chris. Down-facing dog.
Oh, forget that. Okay, top work, Gary. Take care.
Cheers.
Thank you, Gary. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I think that we should change the order a little bit here.
I think we might have to change
because
the order
there's
a little bit.
Noise going on in the background, which I need to sort out. So we were going to talk about feathers, but I think, why not let's skip over and have a look at those ospreys. Because Tim Mackerel is someone who's been involved in this project, and he's going to send us some of the detail now, but a bit of background to this remarkable project, which we will be watching unfold over the next few weeks. So here is Tim telling us a bit more about England's new ospreys.
Hi, I'm Tim Mackerel from the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation, and we're a partner in the Poole Harbour Osprey project alongside Birds of Poole Harbour and Wildlife Windows. And I have to say, thank goodness for technology over the last few days, because it's been fantastic to watch CJ7 on the nest at Poole via the new live feed. And it's going to be really exciting if LS7 does come back sometime this month. But what I wanted to do this morning was really just to put this all in perspective, to talk about the distribution of ospreys in the UK and how projects like this, really proactive conservation work, can have such a really meaningful impact. And the point is that the osprey is not a bird that should be a rare bird in this country. It should be common. It should be something that people enjoy seeing all over the UK. And the reason they're not at the moment is because of historical persecution. We know that formerly they were widespread across the whole country, but then particularly during the Victorian era they were relentlessly persecuted, eradicated from England, and just a few individuals were left in Scotland. Well, of course, things are now looking much better. There's over 300 pairs in Scotland thanks to some really fantastic conservation work, and now they're also doing much better in England and Wales. And the reason for that is translocation projects, and they're needed because despite the fact that the osprey is a bird that has this amazing ability to disperse, they fly 3,000 miles to West Africa every year, Male ospreys particularly like to come back and breed close to the place where they were hatched and fledged from. So we know this thanks to some really detailed scientific monitoring using these things, colour rings, which are fitted to young ospreys when they're about 6 weeks old. And that's been coordinated by Roy Dennis since the 60s and the 70s. And what that data has shown us is that male ospreys generally will breed within a few miles of their natal site. So despite the fact they pass through many areas of England with suitable habitat, they don't want to breed there because they want to basically go back home in order to nest for the first time. So in order to restore populations of ospreys, the best way to do it is actually to move a small number of birds. That's what happened at Rutland Water, which is where I first got involved with this fantastic bird. We moved a small number down from northern Scotland down to Rutland Water in the Midlands, and they started coming back and breeding, and the first pair bred in 2001, and there's now 10 breeding pairs. Other birds from Rutland went across and bred in Wales. And so what we're now trying to do through the Poole Harbour project is to restore the osprey to the south coast. The old English name on the south coast is mullet hawk, which of course alludes to the fact that that is a favoured fish species that they catch in estuaries like Poole Harbour. And we know there's a huge amount of suitable habitat. We just need the birds there in order to establish that population. And what will be really exciting if they do breed for the first time this year is that although LS7 is a translocated bird, so a bird we moved from Scotland, CJ7 is a female, and females are a bit different. They can be tempted to breed away from their natal site if they come across a male with what they think is a good nest. And that's what's happened with CJ7. She's come across the translocated birds when she first arrived in 2017. That's kind of acted as a pull to her to keep coming back to Poole Harbour, and now there's a male hopefully she's going to breed with this year. And it would be fantastic for conservation of ospreys in this country if the first pair on the south coast for 200 years consists of a bird from Rutland Water and a translocated male from Poole Harbour. So we're all keeping our fingers really firmly crossed that this is the year that it happens. But even if it doesn't this year, we know that things are really looking up for the species, and I hope that in years to come this kind of conservation effort will result in ospreys being as common as they are in parts of North America. In North America, they nest on the masts of boats and on top of lampposts. Wouldn't it be fantastic if that was the case in England and southern Britain in years to come?
Time goes on next week. But very excitingly, we're just looking at the live cam right now, and we have the female live on the nest. So take a look at this. She's just come in, she's been going in and out quite a bit, and she's just bringing in some nest material, padding it around, waiting for her male to come. You're right.
I had to run down the lane. There's some issue with the power cables apparently. And which run across the farmland here, and so the people who are responsible for managing those have turned up to make sure that they were okay. So I've asked them if we could have a 10-minute reprieve, and they very kindly agreed, so big thanks to them.
So, yeah, some big machinery going on.
What did I miss? Did I miss the osprey?
You missed the ospreys, and we had her live on the nest.
Oh, fantastic.
Isn't it?
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
Look at her, the way she's looking around, making her nest. Isn't that such a special sight?
Oh, sensational. And the sunlight shining on that. It's a beautiful picture as well, isn't it? Really?
Beautiful picture.
See that little piece of branch coming out the top there?
Yeah.
That's been put there deliberately so that the male can sit on it, because very often when the female's on the nest, the male will sit up alongside her there. And so they put those perches in deliberately so that they can sit along the side if there's not an adjacent tree to the nest, because obviously this is on a platform, an artificial platform, not in a tree, and that's been put there so that they can be encouraged to go to the safest places to start breeding when they do return. And it's fingers crossed, of course, that process will start this year. I've almost got the breath back.
You are very out of breath.
Oh, I know, I had to run.
You did leg it.
Sprint.
I've never seen you run so fast
And then
in my life.
Nancy ran away, and I had to chase Nancy. I mean, should we move on?
We're
Anyway,
barking poodles. You disappeared. It's all.
when you're
going
out and
very well.
about, and this weekend everyone is being encouraged to stay at home. That's not saying that you can't take your exercise. That's saying don't drive to somewhere else to take your exercise. Take your exercise locally, that hour a day, which we're all doing at the moment. So don't travel, but you may get the chance to walk in some green spaces. And this year, quite a few of our bird species, although it's the breeding season, are molting. Now, one bird that's molting at the moment is this one. I found this feather a little while ago, and this is a goshawk feather. Look at that, it's sensational. Beautiful tail feather from a goshawk. What else have I got here? Oh, this one's a little bit more plain. This is the feather from a raven, and then there's this one here. This one here is from a grey heron. Obviously you can see grey and huge. And this one a buzzard. So you can make a feather collection. It's always sometimes a bit challenging to identify which species it has come from. You need to get back to your field guides and have a look through, think about the anatomy of the bird. Little one, let's see if you can guess what this one is. Yeah, that's great spotted woodpecker. And you can keep these feathers in a little collection. It's a great thing for young people to do. I've got hundreds and hundreds of feathers from birds that I've collected all over the world. Most of these birds here, the pigmentation is sort of brown or black or grey, and that coloration is being produced by a pigment called melanin. It's the same melanin as we have in our skins to protect us from the sun, and mammals have in their fur. It's one of the most common and predominant pigments in the animal kingdom. And it normally gives us reds and brown colours, but it depends on the microscopic arrangement of what we call melanosomes. And these little packets of pigment, the way that they're arranged in the tissue, is what produces that colour. So that's all down to pigment.
And that's all browns and reds, though, Chris. What about the blues and the greens? Well, actually, 100% of blue feathers aren't actually blue at all. They are called they have something structural coloration. So it's a bit of a trick of the eye. We know that visible light has all different wavelengths and all different colours, and it's the structure, the microscopic structure of these feathers, which makes us see these different colours. Now, I'm not a physician, so I'm going to explain it in terms of biology using some bubble wrap. So imagine that this is a cross section of a feather. Now, as feathers are developing, they are full of keratin particles, as well as mini droplets. And as the feather develops, these water droplets evaporate. And that leaves these tiny, tiny air cavities within the structure of the feather. Now, let me get my diagram out that I drew this morning. So have a look at this top one here. So red wavelength is about 700 nanometers. It's the largest wavelength that we have. So when that hits the cross section of the feather, what it does is it absorbs straight through like this. So we don't see the reflections of red. However, with shorter wavelengths, for example, blues and green, what they do is they come in and they bounce off these air cavities that are in the feather, and they bounce straight off, giving us the idea of blue. Now, it depends on how far, can't get it straight, how far down these wavelengths go, depending on how dark or light the coloration is. So, for example, if the light wavelength is to come and hit a air cavity particle that's quite deep in the feather cross section, then you'll see a light blue colour. Whereas if you see a dark blue colour, you're seeing a light wavelength that is bouncing off an air cavity which is relatively close to the surface of the cross section. So that's essentially why we see blues and greens. And of course, we see this in things like parrots, kingfishers, of course, and most commonly very distinctively, the blue and gold macaws as well. So all that blue isn't actually blue at all. If you were to look at it into a light, you see that the structure of the feather is very, very different. But there's two different types of blues. Of course, you have the types of feathers whereby they are blue all of the time. No matter where you shine it, they look blue all the time. And of course, that's structural coloration. However, you have this one here. This is the magpie. Now, the colour of the feathers on the magpie changes as you twist the bird, as the angles change. And that's due to something called film interference, where the light hits the particles both at the top and at the bottom of the cross section of the feather, and the mixture of light then creates this illusion that that we get shiny different blues and purples and greens at all different times depending on the angle of the bird, which is pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and which is why sometimes if you're watching a kingfisher and it's in the sunlight, you'll see that its wings can be very bright blue and the centre of its back can look black, and then it might turn so that the light is shining from a slightly different direction and the wings go black, but the centre of its back goes a very iridescent blue. And as Meg said, this is all to do with the angle of the light that's falling on those feathers. But if you look at the feathers under the microscope, there's no pigment there at all. But there are some birds that have those green pigments.
Wow. So 99.9% of birds that show green feathers are all to do with structural coloration. They don't have any green pigment whatsoever. However, churicos are the only known birds to actually have green pigment in their feathers. So we don't exactly understand why or how this has evolved, because these colours are very, very expensive to produce. It's not something that's easy, and if the bird doesn't have to and it can produce these colours by structural coloration, it will do. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, turacos are African fruit-eating birds. We don't have any representatives of that family here, but they're a common and successful group all across Africa, and some of them are very splendidly marked.
But why blue? Why blue? Because blue is one of the colours that is rarely seen throughout the animal kingdom. We think about mammals, we don't really see blue, do we? So
no, some of the fleshy, areas are blue.
Some of the fleshy areas are blue. Insects, we've got that iridescence again, that structural coloration again in insects. But why blue? Because it doesn't help with camouflage. Is it?
Here's something. Someone told me once. I think it was Greg Parker, who's an astronomical photographer, ex-professor from Southampton University. He sent me a paper once which told me that blue pigments in the animal kingdom are actually amongst the most toxic things that we can produce. So it could be that animals don't want to produce these toxic compounds, although they produce the true blue colour. That's one of the reasons why those pigments can be quite toxic. And of course, it's not just birds. We've been talking about birds, but structural coloration is used in beetles, butterflies, all those resplendent iridescent, no real colour. All the tiny bubbles in the particles of their fabric there.
Amazing.
So we do skull of the day.
Let's.
This is the skull of the day today. Final skull of the day for a little while. We're moving to an exciting new quiz next week. Okay, it's the upturned bill, the narrow upturned bill. I mentioned that it was a rarity. I could have told you that it was breeding in Scotland on tiny little lots that it fed on fish. Yep, this is the bill that belongs on a skull of a red-throated diver. Probably my rarest skull, the red-throated diver. So we have red-throated divers and black-throated divers breeding in the UK. In the winter time, we have visitors, the great northern diver and sometimes white-billed diver. At that time, they spend most of their time on the sea. Those latter two species disappear, and the red-throats and the black-throats stay here in the UK in relatively small numbers. And they breed on those Scottish flocks. Fantastic. So far, we've had a very noisy robin and wren. We've had interruptions from the people who look after the power cables, and because they're still outside the gate, we're being interrupted by barking poodles. I mean, acoustically, nothing could go worse this morning. I have to raise my voice over the sound of poodles. Nancy,
we
please.
have been thrown this morning. But it's all these unexpected occurrences that keep it interesting, I suppose. There we go.
So that's our last programme this week. We're not going to be on at the weekend. We've been struggling with our bandwidth over the weekend. And as a consequence of that, we're going to join you again on Monday. Please follow government advice. Take your exercise, but don't travel to do so. That would be fantastic. Next week, got the new quiz. Got some great guests. Dave Golson's going to be on. Gillian will be on. Stephen Moss will be on. Fantastic author. We'll be talking about a writing competition next week. And hopefully we're going to have some live bats live. So yes, living bats live next week, which will be truly fantastic. We go out with that song.
Go out with a song?
Oh, listen. Yeah. Oh, it's stopped.
Gosh,
We'll leave you with this then.
Yeah. Well,
this is fantastic.
It is fantastic. We wish you all a very happy Easter. This is a video that has been going around the internet. We thought slow-mo poodles. We saw this and it had to be this. Enjoy. Bye.
Bye.